Yeah, I would agree. I think in a twisted way, I can say yes, he was helping the helpless and the downtrodden, but in truth, as you said, Mangione is a cold-blooded killer.
Thank you for tuning in to the Removing Barriers podcast. I'm Jay.
And I'm MCG.
And we're attempting to remove barriers so we can all have a clear view of the cross.
This is episode 199 of the Removing Barriers podcast. And in this episode, we'll be comparing Daniel Penny and Luigi Mangione and the circumstances which brought both men to the spotlight.
Hi, this is Jay. MCG and I would like for you to help us remove barriers by going to removingbarriers.net and subscribing to receive all things removing barriers. If you'd like to take your efforts a bit further and help us keep the mics on, consider donating at removingbarriers.net/donate. Removing Barriers, a clear view of the cross.
All right, Jay, let's start with who is Daniel Penny and Luigi Mangione, and what the background and their stories.
Daniel Penny is a former Marine who was acquitted of the charge of manslaughter in the death of Jordan Neely on a New York subway in 2023. Luigi Mangione is the alleged, we have to say alleged because he has not yet gone to trial, but he is the alleged killer of the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
He is a 26-year-old man who is alleged to have shot Brian Thompson in the back and in the leg in a targeted attack in response to what he perceived to be the grievances that he has and many other Americans have against these huge multi-billion-dollar multinational companies, healthcare companies. And he is currently in jail awaiting trial. And he has pled not guilty to all of the counts against him. And the response that these men received in relation to the situations that they were in has been night and day.
Yeah, surprisingly.
Very, very different. They're both in a situation where someone who was a perceived threat was either killed or died as a result of their actions. Legally, there needs to be a differentiation between those two.
I don't know if there was a perceived threat in Luigi Mangione's case.
In Mangione's case, the idea that the rich are stepping on the poor and they they have it coming, in that line of thinking. Mangione grew up a lot more privileged than Penny was. Penny was a middle-class kid. I don't think he got anywhere past middle class his entire life. Former Marine, grew up in Maryland, I think it is. No, he grew up in New York in a middle-class family, joined the Marines for 4 years, got out, used the GI Bill to go to school, and just happened to take the subway, and there we are. History is made. Mangione, on the other hand, comes from a very, very privileged and affluent family. His family owns multiple resorts. Not resorts. I don't think that's the right way to put it. It's more like a country club kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's a country club, health services for the elderly, like a sort of a retirement home, and a radio station and a family foundation. And he went to private school. He actually went to Ivy League school. I think it was Yale, I think it was. Oh, no. He went to University of Pennsylvania, got a master's degree in science and engineering and computer programming, all these things. So he was very, very privileged, did well for himself, but then just decided, you know what? Well, allegedly decided, you know what? I'm going to kill this guy because he represents everything that's wrong with America, everything that's wrong with how I'm being treated. I'm going to kill this guy, allegedly. Daniel Penny, on the other hand, attacked Jordan Neely because Jordan Neely was a 33-year-old man with clear mental health issues and has had mental health issues for at least a decade and a half before he was killed. He was making menacing and threatening remarks and performing those actions on a subway with people who were clearly not comfortable. They felt threatened by his menacing behavior. He made a move. Daniel Penny stepped in, put him in a rear naked chokehold that ultimately ended up killing him. Many people say that the man died on the subway, but officially it's been said that Neely died in the hospital as a result of his actions.
All right, so we have a New York Post article that we need to dive into that give a good comparison between the two men. Why don't you start reading it?
Okay, this is from the New York Post, written by Miranda Devine. Both Daniel Penny and Luigi Mangione were born in 1998, the year that President Bill Clinton was impeached over the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and 3 years before 9/11. They were raised less than 250 miles apart, Penny on Long Island and Mangione in Thompson, Maryland, the only sons to loving families. Penny is the middle child of 3 sisters. Mangione has 2 younger sisters. Both grew up into athletic and diligent young men. Mangione's upbringing was more privileged than Penny's, and he was more academically successful. He attended a prestigious Baltimore prep school that cost his parents $40,000 a year, graduating as valedictorian before earning bachelor's and master's degrees in computer science at the Ivy League University of Pennsylvania, where his passion was for devising complex computer games to simulate his fantasies. He then worked for various tech companies, including most recently as a software engineer at California online car seller TrueCar. At some point last year, he left that job and started to travel, winding up in Honolulu after backpacking through Asia. He reportedly loved Japan and spent time there earlier this year observing the culture, a bit like a professor studying ants, judging by the emails that have surfaced online. Scary lack of free will in this country, he wrote in one email to an acquaintance, describing an incident in which he went to the rescue of a man having a seizure, but was critical of the slow response of police who waited for green lights despite the urgency. Quote, modern Japanese urban environment is an evolutionary mismatch for the human animal, he wrote.
So there you have Mangione.
Mangione, right.
And somewhat privileged, somewhat upper class life he had growing up. And of course, was able to get the best of education. $40,000 per year for high school is more than some college.
More than some colleges.
More than the college I went to. I don't even think I spent $40,000 in 4 years in the college I went to. But anyways.
Well, here's Penny. Penny grew up in a less wealthy environment without the advantages that Mangione enjoyed. He attended public school, West Islip High. Might be Islip High, but I think it's Islip High, where he excelled at sports before joining the Marines, serving as a squadron leader on 2 overseas deployments. After 4 years in the military, he spent several months working at a surf shop in North Carolina near Camp Lejeune. Camp Lejeune, as they say now. He then enrolled in college but found it unfulfilling. Like Mangione, he had come to a crossroads in his mid-20s and decided to travel the world in search of meaning. Growing up here in New York, I have always been inspired by the ambition and grit, Penny said. Penny dropped out of college and backpacked through Central America, inspired by the novel Don Quixote he wrote in an online job-seeking profile. Don Quixote is really great. I love that story. But anyway, Don Quixote is so inspired by adventure, he leaves his, quote, normal life to pursue his dreams despite being called a madman. Being able to serve and connect with the most interesting and eccentric the world has to offer is what I believe I am meant to do. Until this year, the lives of these 2 restless young men tracked almost perfectly.
So when they said this year, they're talking about 2024, not 2025.
That's right. Penny was a top lacrosse player at West Islip, or Islip. Mangione played soccer and ran track. Both liked surfing, Penny in Long Island and Mangione in Hawaii. They even looked like the reverse mirror image of each other. I do not agree with that, but okay. Handsome and strong, they both liked to wear their curly hair a bit long, with Penny blonde and Mangione brunette. Each man has been described by friends as a, quote, people person. But there, the similarities end. One of these all-American 26-year-olds is allegedly a cold-blooded assassin who fatally shot a man in the back in Midtown Manhattan. The other is a good Samaritan who saved the subway passengers from a deranged vagrant who was threatening to kill them. Mangione and Penny both have found themselves caught in the tender mercies of the Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg this year over 2 tragic and very different deaths in this city. Both young men see themselves in heroic terms, but Penny is the only hero. He never should have been charged over the death of a violent drug-addled Jordan Neely, who was threatening passengers on the F train on May 1st last year before the former Marine restrained him with a chokehold. Penny was driven by empathy for the women and children recoiling in fear as Neely, 30, shrieked, "I'll hurt everyone here! I'll kill you! I don't care if I go to prison!" The sad surveillance footage shows Neely struggling, while Penny and another man restrained him for 7 minutes. When the police arrived, he was breathing. Despite a malign prosecutor who kept referring to Penny as, quote, white man, and portrayed him as a racist, a unanimous jury, majority female and including 4 people of color, acquitted Penny of criminally negligent homicide this week. I didn't see a black man threatening passengers, said Penny. I saw a man threatening passengers, a lot of whom were people of color. I was scared for myself, but I looked around. I saw women and children. He was yelling in their faces. I didn't want to be put in that situation, but I couldn't just sit still and let him carry out these threats. In an interview with Fox News, Judge Jeanine Pirro, Penny said, I'll take 1 million court appearances and people calling me names and people hating me just to keep one of those people from getting hurt or killed. Mangione, if he is guilty as charged of the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, 50, is no hero. The man who walked up behind Thompson in the early morning darkness of December 4 and calmly pumped 3 bullets into his retreating body is a psychopath. The harrowing surveillance footage begins with Thompson walking purposefully down West 54th Street toward the Hilton on 6th Avenue, where he was due to give a speech at a conference. It is to be the last journey for the 50-year-old father of 2 who pulled himself up by the bootstraps from a working-class family in rural Iowa, the son of a beautician and a grain elevator operator. He went to a state school, South Hamilton High School in Iowa, where he was class president and homecoming king in his senior year. He graduated in 1933 as valedictorian. 1993 as valedictorian, just like Mangione. The last moments of his life on that cold morning last week, and of course this was
December of 2024.
The last moments of his life on that cold morning are captured in the grainy video police found from a camera on the street corner. It shows the gunman emerge from the shadows wearing a black hoodie and coolly aim his guns at Thompson's back. Thompson staggers, then stumbles to his right, clutching at the wall and looking back in shock at the gunman who calmly reloads and fires a second shot as he walks toward his prey. You can see the blur of Thompson's face before he is spun around, staggers a few steps and slumps to the sidewalk. The gunman fires a third shot as Thompson falls, then briskly walks toward his victim. But Thompson has stopped moving. The gunman veers away across the street. His sick, real-life game has worked just as planned. The words he engraved on the deadly bullets, deny, defend, depose, evoke the tactics insurance companies are said to use to avoid paying claims. But they are simply there to give him glory and the fake alibi of a valiant avenger. When Mangione was arrested Monday at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, police allegedly found a rambling manifesto that presents him as a hero who did what had to be done because healthcare executives like Thompson are, quote, parasites who kill Americans. The words belie a life of narcissism and delusions of grandeur. They are another transparent attempt to paint the premeditated murder of Thompson as a noble mission. And yet, it is Mangione and not Penny who has attracted swooning fans online who exhibit the same psychopathy and lack of empathy as their beloved anti-hero. It speaks of a society that has lost its moral compass, that Mangione sparks admiration while the valiant Penny is condemned as a, quote, white vigilante. It shouldn't have to be said. Cold-blooded murder is bad. Risking your life to save vulnerable strangers from a violent predator is good.
So I guess the question begs then why, of course, I think the author of this article kind of jump into it a little bit, but in your opinion, why do you think that Daniel Penny was widely condemned as evil while Luigi Mangione was hailed by many as a hero? Why the difference in the court of public opinion?
The only difference in the court of public opinion that would have Penny be the zero and Mangione the hero is who they killed and why. Jordan Neely was a black man, homeless, mentally ill, so he checks off a lot of the intersectionality boxes. While Brian Thompson was a white man, rich, a CEO, well-to-do, he's public enemy number 1. And so Luigi Mangione, even though he was very similar to Brian Thompson, the only difference was that he wasn't a CEO, he was privileged just like Thompson was. But because he killed the right person who was in the wrong section of intersectionality, that makes him a hero. While Jordan Neely, who's in the right area of intersectionality, being killed by Daniel Penny, who's in the wrong area of intersectionality, is a zero. So it isn't about right and wrong. It's not about righteousness and wickedness. It's about who is following the currently mandated orthodoxy as established by the radical left. And when that's your prism, then of course Mangione is a hero and Penny is a zero. There's also, I think, a little bit of what's called pretty privilege happening here. That's hard to say. Pretty privilege. Mangione is a handsome young man. By many standards, he's a handsome young man. And so all of these, I shouldn't say this because I don't know if all of them have cats, but all of these cat-owning single women who despise men, and they are very prominent on the left. You could see a lot of them on the left. They're swooning because he's a Robin Hood figure. He is a hero. He's so dangerous. And look at him. He's so handsome. And he killed the right white guy. This is our guy. We love him. He can do no wrong. Meanwhile, Penny, who by any standard is probably not as handsome as Mangione or whatever, is considered to be worthless, racist, whatever other name they called him when he killed when he subdued, I should not say he did not kill him. Well, he didn't murder him, I guess I should say. When he restrained Jordan Neely and it resulted in his death. Well, Daniel Penny was doing the right thing for the right reason to the wrong person. So they need to string him up, of course.
The first thing that comes to my mind based on what you're saying is that, how do we even define witch? Could you do me a favor and search and see if you can find out what Brian Thompson net worth was?
Okay, let's see.
I don't know, but sometimes we throw out the word rich around and I don't know.
I think I remember him.
If you have $5 million net worth, are you rich? Well, if you compare that to...
I think he was worth 200 some
If you compare that to what you call this guy, Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank, he has a net worth of 400 million.
Oh, really? Kevin O'Leary?
But is he rich if you compare him to Elon Musk, who have a net worth of over 280 something billion?
Yeah, he's a nothing. Right. Brian Thompson's net worth is reportedly to be about 50 million.
Okay. Well, I guess
42, 50 million, somewhere between 40 and 50 million.
I will consider that rich.
Super rich, sure.
I will consider that rich. I think you're not the hell on the head. I think the reason why Luigi Mangione was hailed as many as a hero and Daniel Penny as an evil person is basically the hegemony.
Yeah, the hegemony.
The social, cultural, ideological, and economical influence exerted by the dominant group. So basically, they're saying Daniel Penny fits all of it. He's white. Jordan Neely, as you said, is black. Daniel Penny is at the top of the hegemonic power, meaning he's white, male, heterosexual, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Jordan Neely is kind of at the bottom of the hegemonic power to some degree because he's black, he's male. You can argue that he may have a disability because he goes to mental issues.
Sure.
And then he's homeless. So he's pretty much at the bottom of the hegemonic power. I guess the person that has the very, very bottom of the hegemonic power would be a black man who's changing into a woman. He will be probably at the very bottom of the hegemonic power, especially if he has mental issues and some sort of disability. So Luigi Mangione, though white, and the funny thing is, Luigi Mangione is at the top of the hegemonic power.
Sure.
According to them, he would be rich, male, white, everything that, quote unquote, Brian Thompson would have had. But and he's even higher on the hegemonic scale than Daniel Penny.
Yeah, but see, Brian Thompson was higher on that scale than Mangione was, right? Because at least Mangione could say that, he's not white in the sense that, because, he has there's some immigration. Yeah, Italian, but that doesn't quite count as white from Iowa, right?
I don't know because Mangione had generational wealth. Brian Thompson is first generation.
See, Brian Thompson is, dirty blonde, blue-eyed from Iowa. He's whiter than Mangione, according to their watch.
Right.
He's higher on the scale of hegemonic power than all of this is nonsense, obviously, which is why I'm laughing at it. Because according to their logic, Elon Musk shouldn't be at the top of the tower or at the top of...
Well, he's African-American.
Not according to them. You see what I mean? It makes no sense.
Well, he's from South Africa. But anyways...
It makes no sense.
There was recently an interview between Taylor Lauren and some guy from CNN. And this is what she said concerning why so much people like Luigi Mangione. We'll play it and come back.
She's an absolute quack, by the way.
Come back on the other end. And we discuss if she have a point or not. Okay. But let's see what Taylor Lauren has to say.
Hilarious to see these millionaire media pundits on TV clutching their pearls about someone standing a murderer when this is the United States of America, as if we don't lionize criminals, as if we don't have, we don't stand murderers of all sorts, and we give them Netflix shows. There's a huge disconnect between the narratives and angles that sort of mainstream media pushes and what the American public feels. And you see that in moments like this. And I can tell you, I saw the biggest audience growth that I've ever seen, because people were like, oh, some journalist is actually speaking to the anger that we feel.
The women who gather outside court in New York.
So you're going to see women especially that feel like, oh my God, right? Like, here's this man who's revolutionary, who's famous, who's handsome, who's young, who's smart. He's a person that seems this morally good man, which is hard to find.
Yeah, I just realized women will literally date an assassin before they swipe right on me. That's where we are. I'm sure you wouldn't like to be compared to a Trump supporter, but some of how people cannot understand why people have sympathies for Mangione strikes me as the same as a lot of media not understanding why people support Trump.
I totally agree.
It's because a lot of people are just really, really desperate.
They want somebody to take on the system. They want somebody to tear down these barbaric establishment institutions.
All right, so there you have it. I'll give my take on what Taylor Lauren said, and I'll let you jump in, Jay. So does she have a point in terms of why Mangione is being praised? In a nuanced conversation, I will probably say yes. And here's why. If you look at podcasts like true crime podcasts and stuff like that, or that genre of podcasts, or even TV shows, they have a lot of big hits. And I think a lot of people are just interested in that sort of thing. The crime, the court session and all the time, kind of true crime. But I think the way she presented will turn off a lot of people. If she had said, I totally and unequivocally condemn Luigi Mangione for the senseless murder of Brian Thompson, and then she said what she said, I think people would probably see the nuance a little bit more, that people are probably liking this guy because it's true crime. It's intriguing to some people to follow these kind of things. That's why some people are, I guess, morbid. They like to study death and how people die and all those things. Everybody have their things that they like and dislike, I guess. But she didn't start out by condemning his action. She just went straight into praising the fact that he's young and he's handsome and people are looking for all these things. And it come across as if she's supporting or hailing a cold-blooded murderer, which I'm not quite sure if she's doing or not. I can see folks condemning her and say, yes, that's probably what she's doing. But I think if she maybe started with a disclaimer and said, hey, I totally and unequivocally condemn the senseless murder of Brian Thompson by Luigi Mangione, she probably wouldn't have got much pushback as she did when she said that. What's your take?
I think she's slimy. I think she really does agree with all of the people that she claims that she's speaking for. We're talking about all the people fangirling over this guy. But she can't afford to actually come out and say that because she doesn't want to lose her standing. She went on Hannity on the Fox News Network. This is a few days before Easter of 2025. And when he confronted her with what appears to be her support for Luigi Mangione, she kind of tried to clarify and backtrack and say, no, I wasn't saying that he was great and that he was handsome. I'm saying that the women are saying that about him. I'm not saying that about him. And I'm just explaining what people feel. People who feel like they've been oppressed by the system and blah, 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 all of the woke stuff that we know that she champions. When Hannity tries to pin her to the wall and explain that a father has been gunned down in cold blood in the street, a father of two, and you have no sympathy for that? You don't condemn the people that are praising this guy and sending him letters and sending him money and supporting him and fangirling over this guy? You're not going to speak out? And she simply said, I believe in free speech. I believe in freedom of speech. I'm not someone that believes in things like souls. I don't think that these people are soulless. I don't believe in a soul, so I can't say that. But I do believe that there's freedom of speech and blah, blah, blah. So I think that she's slimy. I think that she won't outright say, yeah, I support this dude, even though she actually totally supports this dude. She wants to straddle both sides of the fence and be a supporter of his while not explicitly saying so, because if the weathercock or if the weather vane turns, she wants to be on the right side of history and say, well, I never personally supported him. I'm talking about how other people are supporting him. So anyone that follows Taylor Lorenz's work, or even does a cursory search for her on the internet, knows that she's a quack, knows that she has no morals, no principles, and that everything that she says should be considered a lie. If she's moving her mouth, she's lying. And I think it's clear from what she said there and what she further tried to clarify on Hannity, where she absolutely refused to come out and condemn anything that happened in this particular situation with the assassination of Brian Thompson.
Yeah, I think the lack of condemning Luigi is, it's telling, but, and again, I'm not praising Luigi Mangione. I think what he did was totally horrible, but you can't deny that there are a group of people in this country and around the world that just are intrigued by crime.
Yeah.
And they will listen to podcasts on that topic and TV shows or whatever the case may be. So I think maybe that's what she is tapping into. But you brought up the pretty privilege.
Yeah.
How much do you think that pretty privilege play into the willingness to deem criminal heroes?
I think it's huge. I think it's huge because let's look at people like Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. He was
the Boston bomber,
the one that survived, the younger brother that survived because his brother Tamerlan, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, mispronouncing. I also don't care. But he was the younger brother, and he's a very handsome young man.
I don't know about that, but go ahead.
You should have seen how he was treated, even while he was on the run from police or from the FBI and from all of the other alphabet soup entities that were pursuing him, CIA, FBI, all these people. He was put on the cover of Rolling Stone. He was, like the pictures that came out when he was found in someone's backyard coming out of the covering of their boat, how he lifted up his shirt to show that he has no weapons. And of course, he's a very young man and he's got a six-pack. And so all the girls were like, ooh, wow, he's so this and that. And everyone was fangirling over this guy, so much so that even Rolling Stone, as I said, put him on the cover. Now, in what universe is it okay to glorify someone like that? And it's not like they put him on the cover during his perp walk or, like a condemning picture of him where he's obviously caught and subdued. And no. They put the most handsome picture of him. He looked like a rock star on the cover of that magazine. And girls were like, ooh, he's so handsome. And let's forget the fact that these people killed dozens of people. I need to pull that up, actually. How many people died in the Boston bombing?
It's clearly among women, young women.
We're the problem.
So it's
the woman, though, gave this to me.
Because I don't know of any guy that, in this country where homosexuality is a thing. But
wow.
I don't know of any guy who look at Luigi Mangione and the Boston bomber guy there and think, oh, he's so handsome. But anyways, I digress.
Guys, but I mean, let's be real. The guys are going to look at women that are beautiful and be fooled by them. Well,
I'm not sure.
There's a pretty privilege there. There's
a woman mugshot of women?
No, women in general.
Yeah, women in general, but we're talking about criminals here. I don't think guys fall for criminal women as well.
Yes, absolutely they do.
Maybe I live in a bubble or something, but
until the women bite them and Me Too them, and then they realize, oh, okay, this is a viper with a very pretty face.
I think girls go more for the bad guy vibe than guys going for the bad girls vibe. I think.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. I thought you meant like pretty privilege in general. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I think the bad guy vibe, especially like with Jeremy Meeks when his mugshot was released, I kind of see that a woman will go for the bad guy vibe, but most men won't.
Well, women
go for the bad girl vibe.
Women want a dangerous man because they expect their man to defend them and protect them. But there's nothing wrong with wanting a dangerous man. Your man should be dangerous. He should be formidable.
I don't know about that.
But to cross over and make excuses for his heinous crime just because he's handsome, that's a whole new level of psychopathy.
I think it's more than handsome, though. I think fame goes with it. Well, I guess for Jeremy Meeks, he wasn't famous until the
mugshot came out.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of these guys, the fame that come with it. But of course, as we know in this society, in this world, sex sells. So I guess some level, there's definitely pretty privilege.
Sure.
I just say when they start putting presidential debates on TV, they haven't been a bald president since.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I guess to some extent, people, I guess they haven't been a really short one either. So.
Okay, so this goes to show how we are no longer a serious people. If we can just have our heads turned by the next pretty face, if we can excuse mountains of sin, of crime, of fill in the blank, just because the person is good looking. That just shows that we are a sinful and unserious people. And think of all of the things that Hollywood actors get away with because they're beautiful and they're rich and they can...
And they're famous.
They're famous. And so...
I see, that's what I'm struggling with. I don't know if it's just pretty, even though for some... I guess it could start with pretty. But if they're not famous and rich, it's hard because if you're famous and rich and ugly, you still get many of those privileges too.
That's true. Harvey Weinstein.
Well, I don't know about whether he's pretty or not, but I'm just simply saying, I think class has a lot to do with it as well.
Mangione didn't have as much class.
Well, he wasn't known. He wasn't known. But for him, he was definitely...
For him, it's a notoriety, you're saying. Okay. I don't think notoriety would have been enough to get him to the level where women are, writing him in jail and he has to tell them to stop writing and stop sending him stuff because so much of it is coming in. Jeremy Meeks, is that his name, Jeremy Meeks?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It was just a release of a mugshot.
That's all it took.
And it went viral.
There was no notoriety there. He looked pretty. He's a pretty guy. So much so that he was able to get out and make something else of his life because of the support.
He got a modeling contract.
He got a modeling contract because of the support. No one knew who this guy was until his mugshot went viral.
Well,
because he's pretty. It's a pretty privilege there. And that just goes to show that we're not a serious people.
Look at sports talk show. Usually it's a man and another man debating over sport, and the moderator is a pretty face, a woman.
Yeah.
Of course, they're trying to change that now, so they're having more women commenting in the sport. But the ones that really get serious attention in terms of listeners and stuff like that is the Shannon Sharp and the Skip Bayless when they were doing Undisputed.
And the moderator was
a woman.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a reason why most flight attendants are women. There's a reason why most news anchors are women, because I guess they're definitely pretty privileged.
The Bible says that charm is deceitful and beauty is vain.
Yeah, but a woman that fear with the Lord, she shall be praised.
Right. And so if we are so moved by how someone looks, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying that we're excusing this guy because he's good looking.
What I'm saying, I think it's more than just good looking.
Okay. I agree with you. If Mangione was the one to kill Penny, was the one to kill Neely, he would be treated just as Penny. No. I don't think he would be treated just as Penny. He might still have some supporters because he's pretty. And so some girls would be like, he's right.
Probably.
What I'm saying, though, is that in addition to the fact that we have flipped and we have totally desecrated the standard of righteous judgment, holiness, in our discernment and how we evaluate what's right, what's wrong, what's wicked, what's righteous. In that same way, we abuse and we are misusing the gift of beauty that God has given us. Beauty is not there for us to excuse all of the ugly that we've done. Beauty is more icing on the cake, and it doesn't last, as the Bible says. Beauty is vain. Beauty is sure useful because the prettier you are, the more likely people are to engage with you. That's just natural. We're visual creatures. I'm not knocking that. What I am saying is, in this particular case with Mangione and Penny, there's a lot of pretty privilege going on as well. I mean, not everyone is swayed by this, but okay, let me bring up another instance of pretty privilege, and I want you to see if perhaps pretty privilege plays more of a role than we're seeing here. Okay, recently, what's Jeff Bezos' company again? Blue Origin sent 5 or 6 women up to the upper levels of the atmosphere, not outer space, just the upper levels of the atmosphere where they can experience weightlessness or whatever, and brought them back down. And it was a media circus. It was a media circus because, well, the left praising these women for becoming astronauts, apparently, for going on a joyride up to space and back. And the right was criticizing the coverage that these women were getting because it's ridiculous. The coverage and the promotion and the fawning over these women was just ridiculous. They were not serious astronauts. They were tourists going on this ride to the atmosphere, experiencing weightlessness for about 11 minutes and coming back down. In fact, I think the entire thing from launch to landing was 11 minutes. They weren't even up there for the full 11 minutes. Compare that to what we saw when the 2 actual astronauts returned from space, Butch and Sunny, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember when Sunny got out of that capsule and, she stepped out and she was waving to the cameras, and commentators, one of the first things that I heard them say was, "Ooh, why is she so gray? Why is her hair like that?" She just spent a year in space when she was supposed to spend...
It was about 8 months.
About 8 months in space when it was supposed to be days, was it? I think it was
7 days a week.
Supposed to be a week in space. Ended up being 8 or 9 months in space. She comes back and, oh my goodness, she looks gray, right? Now I have a conspiracy theory here. I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat. I think that Jeff Bezos' trip, this Blue Origin, is it Blue Origin?
I think so.
Yeah. This Blue Origin trip for these, 6 non-serious women, 5 non-serious women, was to repair the damage that a lot of people think that Sunny did to the image of women in space. Because she came back, she's older, she's gray, she's looking kind of rough because she had a rough trip. I mean, it was, but, if you see your female astronauts like that, oh no, we can't have that. Let's go ahead and put these 5 glammed up women up in space.
Well, you see,
that's my tinfoil hat, but that's pretty privilege, right? No one's going to want to be an astronaut if Sunny is on the You see what I'm saying?
No,
that's the non-seriousness of it.
I don't think so.
But if you have 5 glamorous women, you have Katy Perry and then all these other non-serious women go up there with their weave and their eyelashes and their makeup, and they go up there and they're kissing the ground and oh my goddess and all that nonsense that we saw them do up there. Well, then, yeah, girls are going to be like, ooh, wow, that's so cool. People are going to be like, oh, wow, now I want to be an astronaut. Okay, let's all be astronauts. And it's just so all not serious. That's my tinfoil hat. I'll take it off now. But you can't deny the pretty privilege that comes into play there. I think part of why they went up there was to repair the image damage that was done.
How old is Katy Perry?
I don't know. Is she 40-something, I think? Or 30-something? I don't know. Let's see.
I think she's probably about 40. But she's probably was the youngest there.
Yeah, but they didn't look like, you see what I mean?
Everybody can see through the Botox and the lift and the fillers and every stuff there.
Yes, but it's all still there.
Jeff Bezos' fiance is in her 50s, almost 60. Gayle King is probably in her 60s.
Yes, but they don't look.
I don't know about that. I don't think it was anything about pretty privilege. I think they're rich and famous because I can't see people are, especially the target demographic, because if they're targeting men, most men are not going to be interested in 50, 60 plus year old woman, regardless of how much Botox and fillers or lifters they use, when they're ladies in their 20s and 30s, that if it was about pretty, I think they would send younger women up there. Because these women are not...
It's not about young.
In my opinion, they're not eye candies.
It's not about young. And none of us would find. You and I were...
Well, I'm going to say, I think if I ask 100 men between the age of, let's say, 18 and let's say 40 or even younger, I can guarantee you that none of these men would say that these women are catches or eye candies.
On their own, but compared to what Sunny looked like when she came back, they would pick those ridiculous women over Sunny every single time. And Sunny is the real astronaut. Sunny is the real accomplished one. Sunny was the one who actually went up and did science and accomplished things for the nation and for the world at the International Space Station. And she put her life on the line, had to be in space for 8 months longer than she intended to, while real astronauts and real engineers put their real rockets into outer space to bring them back. Meanwhile, these women with their Botox and their fillers and their weaves and their eyelashes and you saw how they were like, their suits weren't even fully zipped up because they have to show the cleavage. These women go up. They haven't even achieved a fraction of what Sunny has. They go up for a joyride, and everyone has lost their minds.
I can't put that in the pretty privileged bucket, at least not for me.
Other reason would there be? Okay,
they're rich and they're famous.
Not all of them are rich and famous.
And they're female.
Katy Perry was the only one that was, Gayle King maybe, and the other one, Sanchez. All the other ones, nobody ever heard of them. No one's ever heard of them.
I can guarantee you the average net worth for those women on that flight was at least 10 to 15 million. And that's being generous. I won't be surprised if the average net worth for any of them was probably well over 50 million.
Let me ask you this. They are not the first women. I'm pretty sure they're not the first women.
The first all-woman flight. Yes. I don't care anything about the flight. They went up, they got to see the curvature of the earth. I would go on a trip like that if I get the opportunity, if I had the money.
I would, absolutely. But listen, there are other women who have gone on this Blue Origin flight.
All men. It was a woman power. It wasn't breaking the glass ceiling. It wasn't the top of the hegemonic power.
I promise you, if all of those 5 women looked like, let's say, Sunny, for example, no one would care. I promise you, no one would care.
I can guarantee you that if all of them look...
Only serious people would care.
If all of them look like, let's say, what's the beautiful woman out there? I don't know. Let's
throw rich people that we know. Let's say Beyonce, Katy Perry.
Okay, let's say all of them look like Beyonce when she was in her 20s.
Okay.
But they weren't rich and famous. No one would care neither because he wouldn't make the news.
I don't think that's true. Okay. They're pretty. That would definitely make the news.
I don't think he would make the news. I think he make the news is not look so much that cause it, because I don't find these women to be any eye candy.
You don't.
They're just basically rich and famous.
No, you don't. But the media is pretty much run by woke people.
And rich people.
Yes, rich people, but also woke people. And most woke people are women. The influence, we're being run by women. The reason why that matters is because you see how women put on the weave and the eyelashes and all that stuff, and they will tell you that they do it for themselves. They do it for them because it makes them feel pretty. The way that men see women that behave or look like that is completely different to what women see and believe about themselves when they dress like that. So you see all of these 50-year-old plus women going up into outer space, 40, 50-year-old women going up into outer space with all the glam, and you're like, not interesting. Well, you're a serious person. Most of the people, we're also talking about the Mangione fangirls here, they're not serious people. All they care about is what looks pretty, who's handsome, who's this, who's that. Do you fall into the currently mandated orthodoxy, which right now was wokeness?
Well,
do you subscribe to that? If yes, then good. If no, then you're out.
Well, we probably should move on from this, but
we should, yeah.
I think the important thing here is what percentage of people are liking him, sending money to him, drooling over him because he's rich, because he's good looking, because he's a recent true crime story. I don't know. Will the percentage be more than 50% of people liking him, drooling over him because he's pretty or because they like true crime? I don't know where the percentage lie. I guess I'm not a good judge of it because for most part, he's a guy. I don't care. I don't.
And if nothing else, It just brings up the fact that we're no longer serious people, at the very least.
Anyways, you're listening to the Remove Embarrassed podcast. We are talking about Danielle Penny, Luigi Mangione, whether they're zeros or heroes. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for a consistent and reliable place to get all your Christian materials? Try ChristianBook.com. Started from humble beginnings in 1978, ChristianBook.com now offers a wide range of books, CDs, DVDs, homeschooling, and church supplies, plus more. So whether you are a parent, a homeschooler, a pastor, or a layperson, ChristianBook.com can be a one-stop shop for all your needs. Click the link in the description section below and check out the vast array of Christian materials ChristianBook.com has to offer.
All right, Jay, let's move on. We're talking about Jordan Neely, Brian Thompson. They were victims of both Penny and Mangione, respectively. Neely was hailed as an innocent victim, while practically no one lamented Thompson's death. Why was Neely a hero and Thompson a zero, do you think? Is the same thing just the reverse of why Penny is a zero and Mangione is a hero? Is that the reverse?
Yeah, I think so. Neely wasn't as privileged as Thompson. Neely was black. And so, of course, Neely has to be the hero while Thompson is the zero. It's interesting because Thompson wasn't threatening anyone. He was just going to work, essentially. He was going to go give a speech or something.
Some kind of presentation. But let's look at it this way. Let's look at it this way, because I don't think it's just simply because of the hegemony. Because, of course, I think the hegemony has a lot to play with. Why? But let's look at it this way. Because, and again, this is not my argument, but I think this is an argument that some will make. Thompson was the CEO of United Healthcare. And just like you and me, we have had dealing with healthcare that is not the most favorable thing to deal with. For most part, I think they try to, as much as possible, to avoid pain when they should be paying. And he's looked at it being as hey, you are perpetrating evil when you deny my grandmother, when you deny me, when they deny my son, daughter, husband, whatever the case may be, coverage that they should be getting. Mm-hmm. And maybe some of them have died. And we are putting all that at the feet of Brian Thompson I think United Healthcare are the biggest health insurance in the United States, putting all that at the feet of Brian Thompson. And they're saying, hey, the reason why we see you, we don't care about your debt is because you didn't care about the debt of my grandmother when she needed United Healthcare to pay. You didn't care about the plight that my son was going through, and you decided to drop coverage or whatever the case may be. Again, I have not had really any really extreme dealing with healthcare. I know when I was doing my eye surgery, and this is not so much my insurance company at this point, but it was more the clinic that I was going at. I know they call me and they say, hey, we want to schedule the first eye on such and such a date, and we have looked at your health insurance, and we're going to ask for a down payment. I think it was like almost $2,500. And I'm like, why do I need to pay that amount of money? At that point, my deductible and my out-of-pocket maximum for my family was $3,000. My individual deductible was $2,800, and my individual maximum out-of-pocket would be $3,000. So it's either when I meet it or when my family meets it. So she went on to explain to me and tell me basically I don't understand my health insurance stuff. And I'm like, she's telling me that the family does not count. I pull it up and I'm looking at it right now. It said either when my deductible is met or when my family deductible is met or maximum out of pocket. And I basically said, hey, cancel everything. I'm going to find another clinic to do it. Cancel everything. That's when she backed off and she said, okay, and transfer me to her, I guess her boss or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And I said to her, look, it's clear here. I'm looking at it. It says either when my deductible is met or my family deductible is met. So if my family has met the deductible, I don't need to put down $2,500. And she said, okay, give us a credit card. We won't charge it until the bill comes out. So I did my surgery. I did on both eyes. And a month or so later, when the bill came out, it was less than $800. And they wanted me to put down $2,500. And I asked them, okay, so when do I get back my money if it's not? Well, you have to go through all these cycles. Mm-hmm. So it's going to give you all that money. You're going to hold on to it. And then you're going to figure when you're going to give me back. That's why I said, hey, to cancel it. We didn't cancel. We never do it because we came to the agreement that I will give them my credit card. They won't charge it until we end up. And I was right. But they're telling me, hey, I have to pay all this money. To me, it's not just the health insurance. It's also the hospitals and the clinics and all the doctor offices that are saying, tell people they have to spend all this money when they probably don't have to. Mm-hmm. And people probably don't understand the health insurance. And I say, if you have health insurance, spend some time and understand it and learn what exactly is required of you and not let some clinical administration sit in their office and tell you what you need to pay before your stuff. And even when our son was born, one of our sons, when he was born, because he was born so close to the end of the year, I went in and I added him to my health insurance for the current year, which would be the new year, and the old year with the year he was born in. And I have paperwork and everything. And I remember the bill start coming in, and we keep on sending back the bill. The bill come in again, we send it back because we had insurance. And all of a sudden I call the hospital. The hospital say, well, we submit the bill to the health insurance. Health insurance deny it, so we send it to you. I call the health insurance. Health insurance say, well, we don't have any records of our son being on the health insurance. So it took me all this time. I had to finally try to get a conference call between the hospital billing department and my health insurance. They said, well, they can't do anything about it because they don't see any record here. So, okay, fine. I tried to work with the health insurance, tried to have them add my son for the previous year. They say, okay, we have added him. Give us 2 weeks. Call back in 2 weeks. It's still not added. Call back again. They assure me that he was added. Nothing happened. The hospital said the bill is still rejected. All this time, I'm back and forth on the phone. I finally got someone who said to me, the only how we can really get him added to your health insurance for that year he was born was to go through my human resources office. So I got my human resource office on there. Then the lady I was working with, the human service office, went on maternity leave. Then they dropped the ball on me. So I ended up having to write a letter of complaint to the human resource office so they can try to get my son added to the health insurance. Finally, it worked out. Well, actually, we ended up and paid the bill because the hospital was threatening collections. And then my health insurance finally was able to get my son added to the health insurance for that year that we wanted him to be added. Then the hospital finally resubmit the bill. And no, not only did I pay them, their health insurance paid the hospital. So now I called the hospital to get my money back. They said, oh, we're going to process it in a month. In a month, I called back. They said, well, the guy that was doing it retired shortly after you spoke to him. And finally, long story short, I got my money back. But I'm simply saying here, I had to go through all that just for the health insurance to pay the bill when the mother of my child had health insurance. Why is it that if the mother of my child had health insurance, that they just didn't say, hey, okay, his mother has insurance, the child should be automatically added to the mother's health insurance. It shouldn't be all this running about that he wasn't added, this and that, especially since I had proof that I added him. So I didn't drop the ball. Either was my HR that dropped the ball or was the health insurance itself. But the health insurance will go through all this just to avoid pain, saying, oh, he wasn't out the health insurance.
Yeah.
But his mother was. Why is it that a baby bill is not being covered when his mother was covered?
Let's be just frank. No one really shed a tear because Brian Thompson was murdered. There was no mourning in the streets. I mean, we feel like it was wrong, but no one was like, oh man, what a terrible loss for us. Because everyone has had a run-in with health insurance company, similar to what you've described, where you get the rigmarole and the runaround for something they should be. Like, that's a common story. So for those that are saying that, Brian Thompson had it coming or he represents everything that's wrong and so we should lay it at his feet. Well, I mean, if we do that, society won't function because then you can put all of your frustrations with the government at the foot of one politician and murder that one politician. Or you could put all of your frustrations with doctors at the foot of one doctor and murder that doctor. Or all of your frustrations with your husband or with your wife and murder such and such a person because, such and such made me. Obviously, we can't have a society based on that. I remember there being a video of a man who walked up to an elderly man and shot him in the face. And before he shot him, said, hey, I want you to know that the reason you're going to die right now is because of my ex, whatever her name was. And shot the old man. And just an old man walking, shot him dead, shot him in the face. That's no different than what people are doing to Brian Thompson. Well, yeah, insurance companies, and he deserved what he got. No one shed a tear when Brian Thompson died. Maybe his children did, and maybe a few close friends and family did. But generally, no one mourned the death of this man. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that's the reality because everyone has had a story like you just described with a health insurance company. But we need to get to the point of, is that okay, though?
My story is minor compared to being denied coverage.
Absolutely.
At least we were in the position to pay our baby bill, even though the health insurance denied coverage. I'm just saying some of these should be automatic, but some people are denied coverage because their health insurance don't think that they deserve to have that surgery or that trial experiment or whatever the case may be. And they may have lived or may not. Who knows? But the thing is, I think a clear understanding of how business work, because Brian Thompson probably wasn't even in a position to change much of the rules, because especially when you're a for-profit company, and they can argue whether or not health insurance should be a for-profit company, which is another topic, but because they're a for-profit company, he's a CEO, but I'm sure there's a board of directors and stuff like that over him, and all the investors that are over him that expect the company to make a profit. Because why they're in business to make a profit. So again, should it come at the expense of people's life? No. But then the only other option is socialized health insurance. And I'm from a country where socialized health insurance, and I'm not quite sure the U.S. wants to go that direction. But some like it, some don't. But I'm simply saying, Brian Thompson maybe wasn't even in a position to make the decision, even if he wanted to change it. Because you're talking about profit. And how does the owners, the true owners, the board of directors, how do they make money? They don't get a salary. They make money when the company make a profit. And they expect to get, if the company make $100,000 profit, they're not going to be satisfied with getting $20,000 return as there's 5 of them. In the investment, they're expecting to get hundreds of thousands, even if not millions. But I think it's a lot of things. I think the hospitals can do better. But should we go to government? I'm not sure about that one.
Yeah, our healthcare system is just as corrupted and convoluted as our political system here, as our government. And so to lay that at the feet of one man, I think that shows a thought process, I think, that these people have, these Taylor Lorenzes and people like her. It represents a regression in our thought process, in our ability to reason. Because what you said was perfectly reasonable. He might not have been in a position to change that. But they don't care. They don't care who they shoot or who they kill. As long as it fits the correct intersection box and as long as, it's killing the right person, then they don't care.
But maybe they wanted to do that to start a conversation. The Bible makes it clear that we should take up the cause of the homeless and the downtrodden. Would you say that Luigi Mangione was doing exactly that?
He says that he was. His supporters say that he was. but I don't think he was. How exactly did he help the poor and the downtrodden except to have
Started a conversation?
killing someone? Oh, anyone that would think that that's how you go about starting a conversation, then you're a terrorist. You're no different from BLM or from these Tesla activists and the ones that are throwing Molotov cocktails and burning Teslas left and right. Well, then you're a terrorist. If the only way that you can get people to come to the table is through murder and violence and all these different things, well, then you're a terrorist. And the people who are supporting you need to look very carefully at themselves, because that's not how America does stuff. We're not the Taliban. We're not Al-Qaeda, although some people would argue that we are, because we start wars and all these sorts of things. But that's certainly not the way to start a conversation. To take up the cause of the poor and the needy and the downtrodden and the helpless among us, we should do it the way Christ did, not in a twisted Robin Hood sort of way, taking from the rich, giving to the poor, exacting vengeance. The Lord said vengeance is his. He will repay. Where do we have any right to take the life of someone and send them into eternity because we feel some kind of way? And I don't think that people who would make that argument have anything to stand on, unless, of course, they're coming from the prism of intersectionality and just the woke ideology altogether. And that just goes to show a perverted heart that would live and believe like that. The Bible says in Romans 1, it's talking about homosexuality and among other things, but the principle is there. People, when you give yourself over to sin, that, there comes a point where God will give you over to your sin. Pharaoh hardened his heart, and then there came a time where God hardened his heart. If we keep turning our backs and our hearts away from the principles found in God's word, God is going to give us over to that wokeness, give us over to that woke mind virus, give us over to the Trump derangement syndrome, give us over to this Robin Hood. I probably shouldn't have put that in there, but give us over to this idea that I can kill this guy and start a conversation. I can kill this guy and I'm justified in doing so.
Yeah, I would agree. I think in a twisted way, I can say, yes, he was helping the helpless and the downtrodden. But in truth, as you said, Mangione is a cold-blooded killer.
Absolutely.
There are other ways and means to get changes in healthcare. Rather than killing the husband and father because of where he works, because that's basically what happened because of where we work. Mm-hmm. Because I can guarantee you, United Healthcare is not that easy for the CEO to make changes, especially when it comes to profit and loss. Their political means, their means of the free market,
But see, no one single person can do that, though.
That's true, but
people.
I'm saying there's political means as well,
right?
Where the government can step in. And again, do we want the government really stepping into this? I don't know, but there are means out there. How about if Mangione had decided to start his own health insurance company? Because it seems like he come from a rich enough family. He could have started.
He would have had the resources to.
Maybe. How about if he had run for elected office and championed for the change? It would have taken him a bit longer. Well, I don't know if what he did is going to make any change at all. But if he had started his own insurance company, maybe he would come around and understand why Brian Thompson and United Healthcare decided that, hey, we need to make a profit. Mm-hmm. But maybe he could have started a non-profit health insurance company where the goal is not for profit, but to help people. And maybe through that, maybe you can have an NGO with the government funded. I don't know. But I was just thinking that there are other means out there that he probably could have explored and say, hey, you know what? Before I kill someone and potentially go to jail for the rest of my life, which you're no help to nobody behind bars, start your own insurance company, run for elected office. Is socialized medicine the answer? As I said earlier, I came from a country where we have socialized medicine. I'm not sure. I wouldn't say that's the answer,
What about Daniel Penny? He was the cause of the death, we should say, of Jordan Neely. Jordan Neely was oppressed and downtrodden and helpless. Doesn't that make him a zero?
Well, I think that's a different argument there because, you can make the argument that Daniel Penny was helping the helpless and the downtrodden because there were people on that train that was in fear for their life, that was full of fear and dread because of Jordan Neely. So you can make an argument that he was doing that to help the helpless. Obviously, he didn't needed any help because he, I guess not single-handedly, but almost single-handedly take on Jordan Neely. It was the woman and their kids on the train that would not have been able to help themselves. He clearly can help himself, so... But at the end of the day, going back to the socialized healthcare, go to Cuba, go to Venezuela, they have socialized healthcare. And the one thing that I want to emphasize, though, is that because I think that they are overlooking something that is very important. Fidel Castro had very good healthcare. I can guarantee that. But I can guarantee that others, his minions or his subjects, maybe did not have. And this is my point. The bourgeoisie is always going to have better healthcare than the proletariat. It's always going to be the case. The rich is always going to have better of whatever than anybody else. I'm going to guarantee you that King Charles have the best doctors and the best whatever available to him that is in the UK than the average UK citizen. And you can make the argument that UK is a perfect example because they have socialized medicine. But I can guarantee you that King Charles have better medicine and better care than the average person in England. I can guarantee that the Prime Minister of England has better health care than the average person in England. I can guarantee you that even in the US, that President Trump have better health care than me and will get better service than me. And we don't have socialized health care. Because look at it, even in this country, with the fact that if you can pay for it, you're going to get it. I can guarantee that's the same for Canada. Canada has socialized health care as well. But I can guarantee you the upper class in Canada, the people in the government, the Prime Minister of Canada would have better health care than the average Canadian citizen. You're always going to be the bourgeoisie, always going to have better. So they can preach for it all they want, but it's not going to happen because the ruling class is never going to give up their privilege. They're just going to make more people, poor or whatever the case may be. So let me ask you though, are the effects of men like Penny and Mangione indicative of the cultural failure of the church?
Okay, failure of the church in that perhaps the prevailing narrative after these men were, put through the justice system, that we would even allow for Mangione to be praised and exalted and lionized and all that, while Penny was, of course, shunned. And that's a cultural failure of the church, I'd say. But there's also an angle of, the church is called to perform charity. And if you have healthcare companies like the United Healthcare, would that indicate a failure of the charity of the church? I think it's a lot more complicated than that. I think there's so many things that go into the American healthcare system and the health of Americans now. I don't think we can pin that on the church. But as far as the cultural conversation afterward, after these men were caught by police and Daniel Penny went through the legal ringer and Mangione's about to go through, our reaction to it, I can for sure lay at least some of the blame at the feet of the church.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think necessarily I will say it's a failure of the church. I kind of say yes and no. I think there's a domino effect and eventually we'll get to the church. But I wouldn't necessarily start at the church in the sense that, of course, there's society, culture is at war here in the U.S. You can argue this is a spiritual war. And then if you say it's a spiritual war, then that will lead back to the church. It can go back to the removal from prayer and God from the schools and all this stuff. Is a ripple effect of the sliding society as we slide from Acts chapter 2 and now fully going into Acts chapter 17 kind of a culture where human life is not valid as it should be and people are entitled and want stuff that they didn't work for, whatever the case may be. Again, I'm not here to defend necessarily health insurance because I already explained my run-ins with them. And of course, it's not as gruesome as some people. Some people have died because health insurance didn't do what they should do and hospitals stopped giving care and stuff like that. And I've seen people going through the medical system without health insurance. And the hospital and the nurses do the minimum. And they will send home people when they shouldn't be sent home. I can remember when our second son was born, I actually went through the explanation of benefits and all the stuff and all the charges that were stuff. And I think you were in the hospital for about 5 nights when our second son was born.
Yeah.
And for each night you stayed in the hospital, it was about $5,250 that was billed. Of course, that didn't come down to us because we have health insurance. But I'm simply saying, $5,000 per night? Again, I don't know why it has to be that expensive. But if we didn't have health insurance, that would have been our bill. It would be over $25,000 just for the hospital stay alone.
That doesn't include the medical intervention.
That doesn't include every
of all
other
our kids,
thing.
He required more. And that would have been even...
That didn't include any other thing. That's just the hospital stay.
Yeah, wow.
Of course, we had, I don't remember what insurance we had then, but for most part, all of that was covered. I don't think we paid much because our deductible was whatever it was then. But I'm just saying, if the health insurance can negotiate and get that $5,000 down to $200 per night, why is it that the hospital just don't charge you $200 per night?
There's money to be made.
I don't think it's just health insurance. I think it's also the providers as well meaning the medical provider, the hospitals and the clinics and the doctor's offices. Again, I have no problem with them making their money. I'm just simply saying, if you look at the explanation of benefits and stuff like that, yeah, there's a price for when you have insurance, there's a price when you don't have health insurance. And I'm simply saying, there's something going on here. Things can be changed.
Yeah.
I just don't think is the way he went about doing it is the way to do it. Of course, again, he's a murderer. And
point blank, by the way, point blank, right. Mangioni's a murderer.
Allegedly.
He hasn't gone through yet, right.
But the thing is this a failure of the church? I don't know. You can say it's a failure of society. And if you're going to say it's a failure of society, you can eventually reach to the church through that. Because why is society failing? Because maybe Christians are not being salt and light as they should be.
Well, I mean, some Christians have already begun to address this problem by doing this, what is it called? The crowd sharing or the...
Yeah, stuff like Christian healthcare ministries and stuff like that.
Exactly. There's an alternative to using healthcare. So there are some people addressing the issue. Is it enough? Does it address the corruption and the waste and all of that stuff that we just discussed in the American healthcare system? That's up for debate. But some Christians are doing something.
All right. Well, who would you say is the hero and who is the zero in this? I think you already...
Yeah, I think we...
Yeah.
I mean, Penny's the hero. No doubt about it. I agree with Miranda Devine on this. Penny is the hero. Mangione is the zero. Even if you were to make the argument that Penny is the zero because he held on to that choke way too long and it caused the death of Jordan Neely, fine. That's a conversation to be had. But he was doing it to protect the lives of the people that Neely threatened on that subway car. And Mangione simply allegedly did it.
Vigilante.
Yes. So to me, there's no question here who the hero and the zero are. What do you think?
I fully agree. I think, as I said, Mangione is a cold-blooded killer. So Mangione is definitely a big zero.
Yeah.
And so if I have to choose a hero, it would definitely be Penny.
What do you think will happen when he goes through trial? Do you think that it's going to... Oh, I think it'll obviously be a media circus.
Yeah, it will definitely be a media circus, but I remember I predicted that Penny was going to be released, and you kind of disagree when we did that episode with Jordan Neely, A Soul for Which Christ Died.
Mm-hmm.
I did some further research and found out that over 75% of the population of New York use the subway in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at that, you can understand it, because I think 5 of the jurors on there, they actually use the metro. And if you use the metro anytime in New York, you probably have seen something that was a little bit unnerving or very unnerving.
Sure.
So I'm not surprised that he was released, because most of the time people can identify with that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see in any way how Mangione is going to get off, because...
Even though people can identify, like they put all of their healthcare grievances with Thompson.
I don't see in any way they can justify this, because there's no nuance here or any fine line he can go through.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if Thompson is guilty of being snake oil salesman and refusing coverage and stuff like that, there are other means for you to get to him than to shoot him in his back. So I don't see how any reasonable juror will say, you know what, we're going to do jury nullification. You did a good deed for society. I can't see that. For Daniel Penny, I definitely would say I could have seen that, because, as I said, 75% of the people use them subway in some way. Even if they drive to work, when they're going to lunch or something, they're going to pick a quick errand, it probably might be best to jump on the subway than to drive in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see that, but I can't see Luigi. And I think during the jury selection, the prosecution is probably going to quickly get rid of any fangirl and people that stuff. I don't see how it's going to go, especially if you get a bunch of wives and mothers on there and they're going to be playing the fact that he's a husband and he's a father and all that stuff. I don't see how he's going to get off. But I'll let Ken Ham close us out with his take on this.
Who would have ever thought we'd be living in a time when murderers are considered heroes?
What do you think about Luigi Mangione?
Up in the air about it, because he killed someone, but I can understand part of his reasoning.
Luigi Mangione, do you think he's a hero?
Yeah, I do think he's a hero.
Should he be free?
Yes.
Why?
He's fighting for the people, come on.
Let's go.
He's a man
of the people. Man of the people? He's a man of the people.
The entire school walked out in support of Luigi. Kids are all right. That's amazing.
I suppose in one sense it's not surprising, since millions of children are murdered in their mother's wombs, and those who murder them, the abortionists, are considered heroes or heroines. But we now have this particular example of Luigi Mangione, who shot the CEO of United Healthcare, and we have people who are applauding it.
Taking someone's life is objectively something that's wrong to do, but he is a hero, in my opinion.
And then you have ABC News, and the headline was this: supporters of suspected CEO killer Luigi Mangione establish defense fund. And the article began, as New York City prosecutors worked Thursday to bring murder charges against Luigi Mangione in the brazen killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, supporters of the suspect are donating tens of thousands of dollars for a defense fund established for him, leaving law enforcement officials worried Mangione is being turned into a martyr. And then politician Elizabeth Warren, she stated this in an interview.
But you can only push people so far. And then they start to take matters into their own hands.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, in other words, how about in reference to politicians? If somebody said, well, you politicians can only push us so far, and then we're going to eliminate you, or something like that. I mean, it's such an irresponsible statement. It's interesting that Hannity himself on Fox News said,
cheering for the murder of an unarmed man is beyond sick.
Well, I agree, it's morally sick, but how can you even say that? You have to believe in an absolute authority to be able to say that, because if there's no absolute authority, that is God, who sets the rules, who decides right and wrong, then how can you say it's morally sick? Why shouldn't everyone do whatever he wants to do? After all, in Judges 21:25, we're told when there was no king in Israel, everyone did what is right in his own eyes. And that's the point. When there's no absolute authority, everyone does what he thinks is right. In other words, right or wrong is subjective. What's good or evil is subjective. And in a culture that increasingly has abandoned God, abandoned God's word, thrown Christianity out of the public education system, taught generations of people there's no God, you're just an animal anyway, then no wonder they think I can do whatever I want to. I'll define right and wrong however I want. Murder is okay for me because that's what I want to do. I can define it that way. Why not? It reminds me of Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Some translations say desperately wicked. Who can understand it? Yes, it's a heart problem. That's what we need to understand. The gun that was used to murder the CEO, that wasn't the problem. Knives used to kill people, that's not the problem. What's the problem? The problem is people's hearts. We're sick. We have a sin problem. And when people let their sin nature rule over them, what happens? They do whatever is right in their own eyes. We're at a time when we see a verse of scripture that I've read many times over the years and thought, wow, I can't imagine a culture being like that. And now, today, it's exactly like that. And that's from Isaiah 5:20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness. We're seeing that happening in all sorts of ways. And now we're seeing it happening in regard to murder, and people calling murder good, and those who want to condemn murder, they're the ones that are bad. I mean, who would have ever thought we'd be in that situation? But it's a reminder that the culture is sick. And you know what? You can't just treat the symptoms. You have to treat the sickness. And the sickness is man's heart. And until people recognize this is a spiritual issue, we're not going to be able to deal with all of these things that are happening day after day. We have to understand the true sickness and deal with the sickness. Doctors don't just want to deal with the symptoms of a disease. They have to get to the root cause and deal with the disease. The root cause is a spiritual issue. And so therefore, whatever we do in our culture, we need to make sure that we understand, ultimately we have to be pointing people to the truth of God's word and the saving gospel and see a heart change from the sick heart because of sin to one regenerated by the work of the Lord Jesus Christ through what he did on the cross of Calvary and the work of the Holy Spirit in our lives. That's the solution.
This is the Removing Barriers podcast. If the podcast or the blog were a blessing to you, leave us a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to share the podcast with your friends. Removing Barriers, a clear view of the cross.
Thank you for listening. To get a hold of us, to support this podcast, or to learn more about Removing Barriers, go to removingbarriers.net. This has been the Removing Barriers podcast. We attempted to remove barriers so that we all can have a clear view of the cross.